We good? Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Penns Manor Board of Education. Would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, justice for all.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Belcher. Dr. Boston. Here. Mrs. Eckenrode is excused. Mr. Hardesty.
Here.
Mr. Larch. Here. Mr. Polenick. Here. Mrs. Williams.
Here.
Mrs. Tate.
Here.
Mr. Packer. Here. Myself, Mr. Johnston.
Here.
Mrs. Dolges.
Yeah, she's here.
Mrs. Eglin.
She also stepped up.
Mr. Grimaldi. I got one. Mr. Dalton.
He's via Zoom.
Okay, Mr. Dalton is, I can at least, okay. Mr. Gramling. Here. Mr. Saffron. Here.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'm sorry, I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sign. Okay, at this time, the board will hear citizens' remarks.
The only one we have, Mr. Packer, is a message in the YouTube chat from a student, Brianna Swanson, who says she misses school.
Is she still in school?
I don't know,
Well,
actually.
she didn't graduate, did she?
That's actually a good point. I don't know.
All right. Okay, we have three items for this evening's agenda. The first is a declaration of COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency within the meaning of Section 520.1 of the Pennsylvania School Code. Can we have a motion to approve the board resolution as presented, declaring the COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency within the meaning of Section 520.1 of the Pennsylvania School Code, 24 Pertinent Statute, what is it? Is it Section 5?
Yes.
520.1, providing for temporary emergency provisions due to the declared emergency.
I'll make the
Do we have a
motion.
motion?
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hardesty and a second by Mrs. Tate.
Is there any discussion on the matter?
Mr. Packer, I'd like to do a little explanation. So first, for those of you that are watching the board meeting this evening, a couple comments. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us. Second, we are in the multi-purpose room of the elementary school. And so the reason for that is so we can be socially distanced and having face coverings off. And so for you all out there can understand us. So dealing with this particular motion, I do want to say this. First of all, I know whether you're a board member, whether you're an administrator sitting here, or whether you're a parent out there listening to this board meeting, or even a student that's listening to this board meeting, I know your world has been upside down since March 13th. I do have to say that I realize that everybody at times has questioned all kinds of things. I know that we've made comments. I know I receive comments, and I know that it gets people on edge. All I want to do is just take time to make us all understand that everything that we're coming for and everything that we come and do every day is for kids. And I know that that's difficult when people look at the situation that we're in, the state of emergency that is declared and we're in. And that's why this particular special voting meeting is called in front of this committee meeting, is to have this special voting meeting for three motions that we are going to go through. First of which, Mr. Packer has just indicated that there is a section in the school code that allows a school board to determine and give the superintendent the authority to make sure that remote learning, in-person instruction, all counts towards 180-day requirement, or the 900 elementary hours that's required, or 990 hours for high school students. So these motions all will go hand in hand in this special voting meeting. And the reason we're doing that is, again, to make sure that our school year flows as smoothly as it can, and the transitions that we've had to go through. And I do have to sit here and say, if you're a community member and a student, I am very proud of the fact to sit here to present the health and safety plan that we have that allows for our students to continue to transition from any one of three options, which includes coming to our brick and mortar school. Second option is having education at home through Google, receiving instruction from every one of our Penns Manor teachers through option number 2, and also our Penns Manor Cyber Academy. I can't say enough thanks to our administration and also to our teachers to come together to provide those three options to you as parents and students. So with that hand in hand, we do have to declare that in order to count the three options that we're going through, or that you have to select from, that the board has to deem that this is a state of an emergency, that they can use this section of the school code to allow the superintendent, myself, to report that we will meet our 180 days of instruction, our 990 hours of instruction if we are high school students, 900 hours if we're elementary students, regardless if you're in person or remote. So I just wanted to make sure that I explained that what this motion is, and it provides, again, the authority for us as a district to establish that remote learning does count for instruction. So if you are a parent or student out there that has selected that option, this motion covers the requirements. Thank you, Mr. Packer.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the motion?
Just one item I have for that, Mr. Johnson, just as you described the three different options, and maybe just for the folks, if they are listening, is there the ability to switch options throughout the course of the year?
Yes, so I want to give more explanation. So the question that Mr. Plenick asked, does this plan that we have established provide the option for students to transition? Absolutely. A month ago, I would never have thought that we as an administration and a group of teachers, and I will tell you, and I have to applaud our group of teachers, they have sat with us for the past 4 weeks, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, to work with us on the different options. And we know as administration and as teachers that we love our school district and we don't want anyone to go to outside cyber. So that is why we come up with these three options. These three options allow you to transition. So if you are a parent and a student that is elected to come into our brick and mortar school, and for some reason you just don't feel comfortable with that selection, absolutely. You have the option to transition out to option number 2 or number 3. If you are also a parent or a student that has selected option 2 or 3, whether that be Google Classroom being taught by our Penns Manor students, or option number 3, which you're taught by some of our Penns Manor teachers and Edgenuity teachers through our cyber school, you have the ability to transition back into the brick and mortar school at any time. You've got to think of this. As teachers and administration, as we sat down, here's why we have to tell you we have to be flexible. Heaven forbid if we have a case that's positive and it's a situation where we can isolate maybe 13 or 14 folks that have to be actually quarantined for 14 days. No teacher, no administrator, or any board member sitting around here wants to tell a parent or a student that, guess what? Now you're out for 14 days. You're done for 14 days. That's not what we want. We've had to come up with a plan that allows you to transition. Heaven forbid if you end up in that situation, we want you to continue your education. And you will have, if you're in brick and mortar, and we would have to quarantine 14 people or so, we want those students to continue their education, whether that be through option number 2 or option number 3. So absolutely, please, as you're a parent or a student. Now, it's not a situation that we want someone to transition every other day and we can't not keep track of you, so to speak. But if it's a situation where you're wanting to transition because you feel comfortable now to come into the brick and mortar school, we want you to. If it's a situation that, as I mentioned, if it's a situation where we have to quarantine a few folks, then we want those folks to be able to go out and still maintain their education day to day. So yes, I'm glad you brought that question up so I could explain. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the matter? Okay, roll call.
Dr. Boston? Yes. Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Belchick?
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you. The second item, approve revised 2020-2021 school calendar. Can we have a motion to revise the 2020-2021 school calendar to reflect that school will begin on Monday, August 31st, 2020?
I'll make the motion.
Questions?
Mr. Packer, if I could also have comment on the changing of the calendar. So if you're a parent or a student out there, I do want to get the clear message out. If the board passes the revised calendar that's presented in front of them, which we will post out on our website tomorrow if it passes this calendar, revised calendar that's in front of them. I do want you to know, if you're a parent or student out there, here's the change. And we originally had our school day starting for students on Wednesday, August 26th. Now it will be Monday, August 31st. Also within this calendar, we will be ending on the exact same day that we had in our original calendar, which is June 2nd. The other change that I want parents particularly to know that this calendar is passed, every single Wednesday that is in the school calendar, students will be dismissed early from school. Those early dismissals are the same time that we would dismiss any other early dismissal, which the high school students would be dismissed at 12:10. The elementary students will be dismissed at 1:10. What's the reason for that? Couple reasons. Let's first talk about why we've added additional teacher days to the front of our whole entire school calendar. We had 2 in-service days at the front of our calendar. Since we've gone to the multiple options of providing instruction, we feel it is very important. In fact, we know we need to take time as administration and also teachers to take time to make sure that we have the equipment in our hands, that we've practiced with the equipment, because in order to have option number 2 presented to about 15% of our student body that has elected that option, we have to make sure that we are able to record and also be able to send out in our Google Classroom lessons that are taught by our teachers. So we need those additional teacher days in front of our school calendar. So we have put 3 additional days. So teachers will be in our building August 24th through August 28th, preparing for the new requirements that will be upon them. And again, I have to thank them because they sat down, come up with this option for us. I know it's taking on a whole new world for them, additional work, just as the frustration everyone has felt since March 13th that I mentioned earlier in this meeting. It is going to be a new world for a teacher at Penns Manor. So we have to give them that time to make sure that they're prepared. Also, we realize that it is going to be more time consuming. And again, that's part of our job and we accept it. But we need that additional time on the early dismissal every Wednesday to provide administration and teachers to come together to, again, keep assessing where we are, also establishing and making sure that our other options that we're presenting besides the brick and mortar is being completed, and you as parents feel comfortable when you've selected those options number 2 and 3. So those are the reasons for the revised calendar being presented to the board to consider for approval this evening.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Boston? Yes. Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Belchick?
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you. And the last item, approve revisions to the district's health and safety plan. Can we have a motion to revise the district's health and safety plan approved by the Board of School Directors on July 9, 2020 to reflect the change launch date from August 26, 2020 to August 31st, 2020?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Tate and a second by Mr. Larch.
Questions?
So, Mr. Packer, if I could just make another comment again. So I do want to tell parents and students that are out there that the only change, I know we've revised our district's health and safety plan last month to add the requirement of face coverings to our health and safety plan. But the only change taking place in this plan is the actual transition from our student start day, now that the revised calendar was approved, shifting it from August 26th now to our starting day for the school year for students will be August 31st. Also want to point out that the summary of the district health and safety plan has always been on the school district website. I will also tell you that I have added the 35-page document, full document, also a few weeks ago to the website. So if you would like to see the entire report and plan, you can certainly go to the website. But again, if you don't want to read down through all 35 pages, you're certainly welcome to read the summary.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnston. Any other questions or discussion? Roll call?
Dr. Boston? Yes. Mr. Hardesty?
Yes.
Mr. Larch?
Yes.
Mr. Packer?
Yes.
Mr. Polenick?
Yes.
Mrs. Tate?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Belchick?
Yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Packer.
Okay, thank you. Our committee meeting is immediately following this meeting this evening, and our next board meeting will be next Thursday at 7 p.m. I'm assuming that will be the same place here. Is that correct? Okay, is there any other business that needs brought before the board this evening? Okay, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, and are we prepared to go into the committee meeting?
Yes, we are. And I'm going to let Mr. Saffron go ahead and leave since we have the business part done, if he would like. He's
all
certainly
right.
welcome. I never want anyone to have to leave, but if you'd like to, sure.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sim. Okay, I'm going to call to order the committee meeting and turn it over to Mr. Johnston.
Okay. So now for those of you that might be listening and watching for the first time, we typically have our committee meeting the first Thursday of each month. And then our business meeting is the second Thursday of the month. So the special voting meeting, again, was a special voting meeting just so that we could communicate out to parents the change in the school calendar and also the change in the health and safety plan. So now we're going to go into the committee meeting that we typically have. This is where the board takes a look at the items the administration has to present, and then they will actually vote on these items in the form of motions next Thursday evening. So first on our committee meeting under curriculum, we have the approval of revisions to all our handbooks. So there are 2 copies, hard copies at your desk, each board member. And first is Mrs. Zeglin with the elementary handbook changes.
Thank you. I have a list of 6 items to be proposed for handbook changes. The first one I just wanted everyone to know is that we are adding the following statement in the beginning letter of the handbook, and that is new for the 2020-2021 school year is information concerning COVID-19 available on our website. All information related to COVID-19, such as school changes or instructional shifts, will be posted on our website. Click the COVID-19 tab at pennsmanor.org for timely and relevant information during this very trying time. I just wanted to direct all parents to the website so that they can get the updated information during this time. Number 2 and 3 have to do with our school visitors, just saying that nobody is coming into the building. The first one, without having their temperature taken. All individuals with a temperature of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or higher will not be permitted to enter the building. Number 4, we added a phrase to the attendance to cover, as Mr. Johnston was speaking about earlier, due to this emergency time, and that is other urgent reasons that may reasonably cause a student's absence. So that phrase right there would cover any student who would happen to either be ill or fear of anything going on right now with COVID-19. Number 5, the dress code. Number 18, addition. We have a phrase, unless used as personal protective equipment, for hats. Just so that everybody knows, we are permitting students to wear hats if they feel more comfortable wearing shields instead of the face masks. We are actually purchasing for pre-K and K, every student, a hat and a shield for them to wear. Number 6, we have our permission to ride, our PTR form for buses. Normally it's a permanent Monday through Friday request change. So if a student needs to go to a babysitter or to grandma's house, we would allow that change. And we still are allowing that change as long as it is every day the same. We are not allowing daily changes. And this is so that we can ensure or try to keep with our minimal of 44 students per bus in order to promote the social distancing on our transportation. So those are the only changes that we have this year for our elementary student handbook.
Thank you, Mrs. Zeglin. Any questions for elementary student handbook? Okay, if not, we'll move to Mrs. Dolges, who will speak about the changes to the high school student handbook.
Thank you. We will add a statement under discipline code that states that discipline code applies to all students enrolled under all of the district learning options, brick and mortar, PM Cyber, and Google Classroom. We do have procedures in the discipline code to address plagiarism and academic integrity, and we want to make sure that those are applied to all 3 learning situations. Under dress code, we will permit personal protective equipment is permitted, and clothing and accessories with a Confederate flag is prohibited. Student parking passes, after discussion, the student parking passes for this year, due to the uncertainty of this year, we've made the decision to eliminate the $30 parking pass simply because should we go to yellow phase, students will not be in the building 5 days a week. And we also are trying to encourage as many students as we can to drive. So the statement that we're putting in is due to COVID pandemic, parking pass fees will be waived for the 2020-2021 school year. Students are encouraged to drive to minimize the number of students on school buses. Students will still be required to complete a parking pass form and a passenger permit form for all students riding with the student driver. All parking forms must be approved by administration and parking passes will be issued. Students are required to park in their assigned parking spot. Failure to park in their assigned spot could result in parking passes being revoked, and administration can revoke parking privileges at any time. Currently, we moved some of the high school staff will park over at the elementary and enter through the elementary to the high school. And we are going to use the back parking lot as much as we can for additional student parking. We will currently have 103 parking spots available for students. That should help eliminate some of the students riding on the school bus. Under attendance, we are going to also add reason for attendance, other urgent reasons that may reasonably cause a student's absence, as well as circumstances related to homelessness and foster care. We are going to add, beginning with the 2020-21 school year, the compulsory age is 6 years of age until the age of 18. Prior to, it was 17 students now fall under the compulsory age up until 18. Preferred method for submitting an excuse is an email address. They're going to email attendance@pennsmanor.org. Students who are in Google Classroom and within the brick and mortar will be required to submit attendance, as well as cyber school. Google Classroom will be added. Teachers will be requiring students to log into their Google Classrooms daily to complete their assignments and participate in class unless the child meets one of the criteria for excused absences listed above. Keep in mind that the lessons in Google Classroom may be a day behind the brick and mortar lessons due to downloading procedures. Parents are required to submit all excuses via email to attendance@pennsmanor.org. The building receptionist will be monitoring attendance via Google Homeroom. And number 4, all of Google Classroom students will be placed in a single homeroom class per their assigned building that requires students to log in daily between the hours of 7:40 and 11:59 p.m. The building receptionist will transfer the daily attendance to our Sapphire student management system. The final part that we have added, and I'm not going to read all of it to you, is just about student responsibilities for issuing of Chromebooks. Since we will be one-to-one and all the students will have Chromebooks, we wanted to make sure that in the student handbook was the student responsibilities. This is all from the information that Mr. Gramling had drafted for the use of Chromebooks. So we put in there the student responsibilities, use and care of Chromebooks, and the expectation of privacy, monitoring and filtering of software, and that file downloads and everything downloaded on the Chromebook is property of Penns Manor. So that's all we have.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dolges.
Thank you.
I do want to point out that just so that you're aware as a board, the reason for having the details in the Chromebook for high school is that the high school students 6 through 12 will be taking their Chromebooks home daily. It's their property and their possession. Elementary will not be taking them home every day. The only reason we will have elementary take the Chromebooks from the building will be in situations where we would move to the yellow phase, that type of situation. So don't think that elementary won't get Chromebooks. They are assigned to Chromebooks, but they'll stay in carts here for each day. But should we have to transition that students are at home from our brick and mortar schools, yes, they indeed will also receive the Chromebook to take home. Any questions on high school handbook?
I just have one question. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. Will, are we using, somebody asked me and I couldn't answer. Will we be using our textbooks, or is that a issue of touching and et cetera? I assume textbooks are handed out in a normal year to everyone and it's their responsibility. Is that the same thing, or what's going to be the any changes in the use of textbooks is my.
Yes, we will be still using textbooks. We would like to slowly try to transfer our textbooks to be digital copies, but we are not at that point yet. So we will be using physical textbooks, but a lot of assignments and different things will be posted virtually on Google Classroom.
Thank you. Understood.
Just the one question I have as far as the for the dress code, and you know, the first statement talks about, you know, all sections, brick and mortar, cyber, and Google Classroom. How would you envision the PM cyber and Google Classroom, the enforcement, or how would you address that dress code in those cases?
As far as if a student, you mean?
If a student is in PM cyber or Google Classroom, they're not here.
Right.
And there's, you know, some requirements that we have identified in the dress code. How does that apply to those folks?
If they're at home, if they're, as long as they're not, if they would be interacting virtually with the teacher, then if they're not dressed appropriately, the teacher can shut their camera off. Anytime you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can mute somebody, you can shut off their own camera. So that would be how it would be applied, simply because we can't have them inappropriate on the other end. But a lot of the interaction with the teachers, I think, will be done through like email, through chats. If they do any face-to-face meetings, certainly we would expect students to adhere to our policy.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I can just envision that sort of being a tough thing to try to adhere to,
Right.
Just because they're not physically in a location that would
Right,
warrant those items.
right.
Unless, you know, it's obvious, blatantly obvious that there's something, and obviously if you have that ability to take them off the screen, I think that's would be
Yeah.
appropriate.
That was one of the concerns that the teachers had. And that was something that when we discussed with teachers is that, you know, if somebody would get on and they are inappropriate, by all means, just click their, you know, you can click their video off and they can talk to you, but you don't have to have that sight between the two of you.
And that's probably going to be for a lot of different interactions through this new virtual type setting
Right.
of how to interact with folks as a group.
Right. And so our plan is to have the students receiving Chromebooks to come into the building the second day of school and to get their Chromebooks and to meet with all the teachers who they're going to have, and the teachers can talk with them about their expectations. So that is something that the teachers will want to address. Like if we are doing a Google Meet or a you know, Zoom meeting, it needs to be appropriate because it is a concern. You know, teachers are talking to teenagers who are at home. You know, that is a concern, but that's something that the teachers will need to address with the kids when they meet with them.
Okay, good, thanks.
Any other questions on high school handbook? I will tell you this, as every day changes, as you hear in media and we get sent things, I will tell you, if anything transitions as our expectations are given to us or guidance is given to us, I will tell you that we still may come up with some other changes in any one of these handbooks from now till next week. If that happens, we will make sure that we email those additions out to you. And if you have any questions or feedback on those, we would appreciate it. So again, don't expect any, but I just want to make sure that you understand that, boy, things have been transitioning and changing. So as we even meet as an administrative group, if we see something that we still want to emphasize or change or put in a handbook from now till next Thursday, we could be sending you an email with that change. Any other questions? Okay, we will move along with the agenda. Well, before we leave curriculum subject, I do want to emphasize so that there is no confusion. I don't want to have any confusion with any parent or student out there. It is this district's plan that we will start our first student day on August 31st, providing the three options and using the calendar that was just presented this evening. So I do want to make sure that parents and students understand that. I know that you will hear all kinds of media and school districts making decisions best for their district. And I believe that we've come up with a plan and are approving instruction plans and a district's health and safety plan is the best for our district. So please be assured as parents and students, our plan is to open school on Monday, August 31st to students. Next, under budget and finance, letter A, Catapult Learning Service Agreement. If you take a look, you have a handout in front of you. You saw a handout similar to this last month, only it was for a different private school. This time, it is Title I funds that is paying for this agreement that comes through us to go out to the private school, Seeds of Faith Academy. As you can see on page 2.1. If you also turn the page to number 3, you'll see that the total amount is $5,039.34 for them for Seeds of Faith Christian Academy to utilize Catapult Learning. Any questions on that item? If not, we'll move to letter B, approve Seesaw Agreement. So in front of you is actually the invoice, and what this is a partnered software that will go hand in hand with our Google Classroom. So teachers and students will use Google Classroom with Seesaw. So you'll see the quantity is 811. So that's to provide access to all of our students in the district. You can see the cost per student, and the total cost we would ask you to approve next Thursday in order for us to use Seesaw all next year is $4,460.50. Any questions?
I know that works in conjunction with Google Classroom, but in what way?
Okay. Mr. Gramling, can you give the best explanation?
So we identified Seesaw through the LMS committee. Seesaw gives some pre-built lessons as well for all grades, K through 12, but it also adds a more interactive ability for our students. So the students can record video clips and sound clips to send back to their teacher. They're able to make notes on otherwise non-interactive documents like PDFs. And we had a few teachers in the end of last school year using it as in a demo setting, and was able to prove it as a proof of concept and interacting it into their classes. And especially in the primary, they felt that Google Classroom alone didn't meet the needs of their students because it lacks those interactive pieces and the ways to reach out to their students. So the primary pushed it, and they were using it really extensively in some classes, and they presented it to the high school teachers, and the high school teachers saw some value into bringing it for them. So.
Okay, now is this something that's exclusive for Penns Manor, or are there other school districts around the area using something similar?
Blairsville is one school that is using Seesaw that we know.
All right, thanks.
And I do just want to point out, so things that we learned from the end of last school year. And again, teachers were learning how to use Google Classroom, students were. So here's just one example. So if a teacher ended up saying, oh, complete this particular worksheet, there was no way that a student could actually answer within that page. This software will actually allow the student to be able to write with that, and it's just not a still thing that you have to print out and then you write on it and then you either scan it and send it back. So it cuts all that out. So if parents are at home, don't want to print or don't have any scanning capabilities, then Seesaw allows that.
I guess one thing, and this is just an invoice, is this an agreement that we have with these individuals, or is this just something that you purchase? Because just like any type of software platform, if a lot of folks use it or something and things occur that it's not functioning the way we would want, are we locked into this for this period of time, or how does that work if that interactive piece, we get partway through the school year and it's just not working for us?
It's a per user, and this is a 1-year agreement, so it would only be for the 1 year, and then we could reevaluate it at next school year.
But I will tell you, so that you know, that elementary teachers did use it on trial basis, and they loved it. The committee, when we were planning at the end of last year, and as they looked at different the committee that Mr. Gramling was talking about looked at many different platforms. That committee still continued to pick Google Classroom, but felt the need that this needed to be a supplement to it in order to make just like, for example, the situation I described before work, so that it wasn't so much strain on people back and forth of not being able to answer to print and that type of thing. I will also tell you the reason that there's 811, again, is for us. So I want you to understand as a board, even though we have students coming into brick and mortar and they're going to have that Chromebook with them and using every day. And the reason we want them to use that every day is we want them to feel comfortable. We want teachers to feel comfortable so that, heaven forbid, someone declares that we're in yellow or red, that we can transition out, and even the students that's in brick and mortar are then comfortable with Google Classroom and Seesaw.
Thanks.
Yep. Any other questions on that one? Okay, next, letter C. If you take a look at it, we've used Acadience before. Maybe I should have Mr. Grimaldi just talk about remind you of what Acadience is used for, and that's for the elementary school. Total would be $3,681.50, and he did find that this is quite a savings this year.
So last year we did the Dibbles benchmark assessments via a company called Amplify. It was the recommendation of Patton and some other consultants to, and it was a business deal too, where that assessment switched to Acadience. And Acadience doesn't have an online version of it. So they reached out to Voyager Sopris Learning, who created the online version of the assessment. So we decided to go with Voyager Sopris. Last year we paid, I believe it was $9,900 to Amplify for the Dibbles assessment. This year, we got it down to about $3,300 going with Acadian. So we saved a bit of money. We kept the same assessment that transferred from one company to another. Last year, we used Acadience for math in grades K through 3. So this year, our plan is to extend Acadience math to grades 4 and 5, and then also use Acadience for our reading assessment. So all of our assessments at the elementary K through 5 will be with Acadience. Not all of them, but most of them.
Any questions on that one? Okay. Next, letter D. You have a handout that says Go Guardian at the top of it. So this is actually a Go Guardian suite, and it actually, if you think about it, it's guarding against things, so to speak. So you can see that we've ordered, again, access for 811. So let me explain that a couple things, and Mr. Gramling probably can even give you more details. I'll just tell you the couple things that I know that this suite will do for us. So for example, I could be a teacher. I have 20 students in front of me on Chromebooks. I can actually access and know exactly what they're in and what they're on by using this suite as a teacher. It also will indicate that if anybody is on anything that's inappropriate, alerts go to our tech department to identify that someone is trying to get on something that's inappropriate and identifies who it is. So Mr. Gramling, do you want to give some other explanations of what Go Guardian will do by placing that on every Chromebook or access for our students?
Yes, we've currently been using Go Guardian in the last school year, actually the last 2 school years. And at that time, of course, we only had about half the student body and then a little more than half of the student body, and it's purchased per Chromebook. So in the past, we've had, there was a need at first for the teachers to be able to monitor to see what's in their class. And so we originally purchased Go Guardian Teacher. That allows the teachers to see what the students are on. They can then lock down if need be. So for instance, a situation would be if a student is taking a test, an online test, you can lock out every tab but the test. So the student would be frozen in the test and they wouldn't be able to go search out the answers on YouTube or Google. They would only be able to stay inside that sandbox that's set up by the teacher. The teacher can also send tabs to them, and the student can communicate to the teacher in the program. So a student, without having to call the teacher over, could ask the teacher a question, and the teacher can respond with a question or even send a video or what straight through the program. So it works well when the students are in the classroom, but it also would work in the distance learning environment where the students are at home and they could be interacting through that program. The other piece that we found a need for was Go Guardian Admin. And that is another filtering piece that we can filter out pornography, violence, and on top, one of the nice features of this software is it is taking screenshots which it runs AI against. So for instance, there are sites that students can access that are normal sites, but there might be words or whatever that we really don't want the students looking at. So when it is running this AI on the screenshots, it'll pick up on those words on the screen or those images on the screen. So for instance, just one that I got the other day, a student was watching a Netflix video, Netflix. And when you go in, it says, like when you first start watching a Netflix video, it shows the rating and what it contains. So it said sex. By running that AI on that, it picked up that word and sent an alert to then investigate. So that is the two parts of that software that we have been using. This year, of course, we had to purchase more seats because of having the additional Chromebooks. But GoGuardian has now created this suite, and they add in Beacon, which is a suicide prevention program. Fleet, which helps you manage your Chromebooks. And these are not things that I've been able to test out, but they're things that will be included for the same price that we were paying for teacher and admin.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gramling. Any other questions on that one?
I just have one question, that's a good explanation. I know there's a lot of these different pieces when you talk about technology
Sure.
and where we need to be. There was a, $4,000 cost we talked about prior. Here's a $9,400 cost. I guess, where are you looking at that as far as where that falls in the budget? Because as we ramp up these things, it's easy right now because we're in the heat of the moment. We need to get to that point.
Sure.
But how are you looking at it as an end result? Where are these funds coming from?
Sure. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, sure. So Dave and I have discussed this actually. This year, these are all going to be paid for by the grant that we received, one of two grants that we've received. But he's having a budgetary transfer from his budget into that grant to pay for those, which means that next year he'll be paying for those out of his budget without an increase in his budget. So we've already taken care of this. This is not one of those things where we spend $10,000 this year and then the general fund has to eat the $10,000 every year for the next however many years. Dave and I have discussed, and the same thing with his Chromebooks when he talked about when he purchases the Chromebooks, he's going to be paying back that cost out of his budget over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. Same thing with this. He's having a budgetary transfer taken out of his budget for the cost of this software and a few other things, goes into the grant, he pays for it, and then it goes back into his budget in 2 years.
Okay, that's good as long as you have that type of strategy in place, because what can happen is as we continue on, this can continue for quite some time.
Sure.
And as we start to layer more things in and cost and supply and demand comes into effect, I don't know if you need to look at the IT budget component a little stronger and maybe see where other areas can be pulled from to support the IT budget.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great point. When I started here, what we found out was that technology spending was spread across all budgets. And in my first budgeting season, we combined all of that into one place. So there was support across all the budgets. There is no longer support across all the budgets. It's all in one place now. So that gives us the flexibility to do the things that we're talking about. The other thing to keep in mind too is, and Mr. Large points this out many times, we don't want to get ourselves into buying things that are grant related things that we're locking ourselves into for 4, 5, 6 years down the road. And so one of the things that's helped us with, the grants have helped us with is buying things like PPE and hand sanitizer and things like that. Paper towels, things that we would have normally bought, we bought with the grant this year. Similar situation. Mark's having a reduction in his budget that's being transferred into the grants, and then next year that'll go back in. So what we're trying to avoid doing is using the grant to, in the future, increase spending in the general fund. And we're just trying to offset existing spending as best as we can without locking ourselves into long-term contracts for things in the future.
That was why I had the question earlier about if there were any other schools using the same platform with the Seesaw, because as this starts to grow in a region, folks may look at it and say, okay, is there an opportunity, maybe coupled with the surrounding school district, to help offset costs as you move forward with some of these things? So I guess, think of those things when you start to go down that road, if that potential would exist, because, the 4 to 5,000 to 9,000 to 10,000, I mean, that all adds up, and then you start trying to scrub it from someplace else, and it's not there. Right. So it's one of those things, I guess, to keep in mind.
Yeah, eventually what you're going to find is certainly online learning is going to be more costly to the IT budget. We're not forever going to be able to absorb these costs. Eventually, we're going to have to talk about, do we increase that IT budget? But for now, what we know is that the grant funding has helped us to start this process. And the other thing to keep in mind too is the intermediate unit has helped in these areas where they've noticed that schools have purchased hundreds, thousands of licenses for a particular product, and they go out and try to get us consortium pricing. Now, I haven't seen them do that recently, but I know it can be done. My fear is that's typically done on the front end as a bait to get a company to sell the licenses. Once the schools are already all in, maybe it might be a little too late at that point, but it's worth a shot for sure.
Mr. Muscatello, actually, we do get consortium pricing through Get More Math.
Get More
the
Math,
IU.
yeah.
It's a math program that we use. A lot of the local school districts use it, and so the IU gets consortium pricing, and we purchase it through them. And it's I don't know how much cheaper it is, but it's. Do you remember, Mr. Gramling?
I know just the agreement we just looked at is 50 cents cheaper per seat. So.
Right. So we buy it per seat, and it's usually $1.50, $1 cheaper per seat. So we do get some consortium pricing for that. And I do want to add, from a discipline perspective and from somebody, that when kids are looking at the inappropriate things on the Chromebook, those Go Guardian alerts come right to my email. And so when it tags, like if a kid looks up something and it hits one of the tags, I get an email to my inbox, and it is so helpful because I pull the kid up and I'll say, okay, what is this? And the kids then give you that, like, oh my gosh, look, because they didn't realize. I said, hey, it comes right to my email. And so it's a good thing to have, because it does keep the kids looking at what they should be looking at and not venturing. And that was with 150 Chromebooks in the building. I was getting a lot of emails. So now that we're going to have, 450, that's, I agree. It's a vital piece, because they're smarter than I am on technology.
So we have this Go Guardian now, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But
Yeah,
the
and
price
actually-
is a little different because we have more Chromebooks now?
Yes,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
everyone will have a Chromebook, so we're getting it for every student.
And
One
not
other
to
quick
belabor the
question. I see on here the expiration date of this quote is 7/30/2020. Is that going to create any problems or?
No.
No. Okay.
And
Okay.
so the current agreement that we are in doesn't run out until October. So the reason that I brought this agreement and we'd like to renew it now is because they have gone to that suite model where we get all those extra pieces in. I made an agreement, if we renewed it now, we would get those pieces to start the new school year. So we're getting those pieces for free for 2 months.
And this money is in the budget, in his budget. It will be replaced, of course, but it is in his budget.
Yep.
In the IT budget.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we're not going to be able to do that forever, but for now, here's what we know. We know that online learning is expensive, and we're starting to find out the things that we didn't have before. I mean, every time you buy a new Chromebook, it's the Chromebook cost, it's the license cost, it's the Seesaw cost, it's the everything cost. So it does start to add up for sure. And just, I don't know if Dave mentioned it, but just so everybody knows, Go Guardian doesn't just protect the student inside the building. It's anywhere you use that Chromebook, at home, Starbucks, wherever. Now, Dave has set up some policies that are more restrictive inside the school, less restrictive outside of the school. But we still have a duty and a responsibility to ensure that our kids are surfing safe on our devices while they're learning at our school. So.
One question I have about the Chromebooks and the Guardian Suite and all that, those are good things. Do those Chromebooks provide a hotspot?
No.
Good.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move to buildings and grounds. First, under letter A.
Mr. Johnston, I
internet-
apologize.
Yes, go ahead.
I apologize. Back on Catapult, Title I,
Yes.
Seeds of Faith, does that mean, can I read into that, any of these last month? It's because we have a student that has left the district and gone to these other entities. Is that why that happens?
That is correct. So any student, so if we have a student in any private school, their federal funds flow through us to them. Yes, correct.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Next, under buildings and grounds, information on the internet antenna removal. We have been contacted by Mr. Wagner to say that he had communicated with the individuals in Indiana. We have not been contacted by anyone from the county. So I emailed him a few days ago. He is to have another meeting with that particular group on Monday. So as I get more information, I'll make sure I pass it along to you.
Did we look at RedNet? I know they're pretty hot in this area, I think, moving in this direction.
Would they take it?
Actually, one of the options is we're waiting on a phone call from Tom Stutzman, director of the Emergency Management Agency in Indiana. This tower may be a candidate for spreading high-speed broadband internet to our community. I think that we're looking at that as our first option, if that can be done. I have spoken with RedNet, not about our tower, but I have spoken with that company before. And as I understand it, they're not really expanding their network at the time.
Okay.
So, and also in the sticks, I'm just not, I don't think our building is in a perfect location right now to receive from other providers.
Right. I know there's a whole networking thing that goes on there, and I didn't know where they were. So, okay.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Buildings and grounds, letter B, All-American Athletics, refinish elementary floor. You also have a handout in front of you, or it's actually on your portal. If you take a look down at pricing. This would be coming out of general maintenance budget. If you look, it's for the elementary floor. You can see that there's a couple different options. We are looking at the pricing under the Express to complete that. There's also another, and the explanation follows below. So you can see what the Express is. It's number 1, the denominator, number 2, and 3, pricing for oil. So let me go back now and explain each one of these. It's Mr. Dalton's recommendation that we would go with the Express to finish it. And you may be saying, well, why are we doing this? So there's a couple reasons. One, please understand that if you approve to do this, this is not taking and resurfacing the elementary floor down like the high school. What we're simply doing is if you approve this, it's permitting this particular company to come in and screen and put the finish down that's the exact type finish on the high school gymnasium floor. So that is the Express, the pricing Express 3608, $3,608. You can see the percent solids change if you go to the denominator. You can also see the price that it would cost if we continue to do oil base, which is what's been used on both gym floors in the past. So that's $2,870. So we're wanting to switch to the same type of finish. We are told that it's from basketball players and everyone that the surface finish that's put on that high school gym is the best. So we would like to put that finish on the elementary floor. Again, I have to emphasize to you, this is not completely sanding the floor down. This is actually just screening off the oil finish, putting this particular finish on. I asked Mark, I said, well, first of all, I said if we continued to do it the method that we have been doing it, and you were to buy the oil product again and have our gentleman put it on, cost estimate that he has presented to me would be $4,585. Working in the hours of our gentlemen that typically do it, the $2,800 for the oil product and supplies. So it is his recommendation that we would ask All-American to complete the resurfacing this year. 2 reasons. 1, to give us the actual topping on that elementary gym floor that's on the high school. At the same time, being that this is a new product, he wants our gentleman to be taught how to put this product on. So again, couple things that you have to keep in mind. If we go with the oil base, it takes 2 weeks drying time. And the Express, actually, he can put it on a Friday, and students and anyone can be on it on Monday. That's how fast that particular product dries. So recommendation would be to have All-American complete that sealing of the floor. Again, that would be $3,608. Any questions on that?
When was the last time that was finished, I guess, down there?
Mark, you're online, but I don't know. Are you able to talk?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
We resurface the gym floors every summer.
Well, I think your question, though, is when was it down to the...
Yeah, when was the last time that it would get to this, say, point in refinishing? When was the last time we did something like that?
Has that elementary floor ever been resurfaced down, or is that still the original?
It was done one time after it was put down in 2004. I want to say somewhere around 2007, we had a roof leak that resulted in the floor warped a little bit, and they had to replace some boards and refinish it.
But let me be clear, Mark, and you help me. So I want everybody to understand that by doing this method, this is just putting a different type product down to shine it up, and it would be the same product that's on the high school floor, but people's not going to see the difference because we're not sanding this completely down on this particular application, correct?
That is correct. We're just going to screen off the current finish that we have on there, the wax, to screen it off completely, touch up any lines that need touched up at that time, and then apply this finish.
I didn't ask you this before, Mark, but when do you think the estimated time would be to resurface that floor like we just did to the high school?
I had a brief discussion with the gentleman from All-American, and it's really no time soon, unless we want it to happen. He was saying that on the average, it's between around 20 years to do a complete resurfacing.
Okay.
I know you probably checked this out, but since we're not sanding it the whole way down, this product will bond to the other product, okay?
Absolutely.
All-American didn't see, okay,
Yeah.
didn't see any issues? Okay,
No, he's been up here. This is exactly what they do for a living. So he knows what we have down there. I actually believe this gentleman was one of the ones that resurfaced that floor back in 2007.
okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions on that? Okay. Next, letter C, a proposal to have K&K install the wireless access points on the outside of the building. And I will tell you, I sent to Buildings and Grounds the map and circled where those would go. So the invoice of $1,800 would be to install those wireless internet access. That's pulling the wires and installing those exterior antenna to the outside.
This is grant, right? Correct? This is coming out of a grant?
There's so many things I keep. You
So
keep
the access
track
points
of that.
themselves, which is not on there, is coming out of the grant.
Okay,
And I'm glad you pointed it out because that $1,800 can also come out of the grant. So
Okay.
I hadn't even thought about it. So just don't tell Mark that because then he'll want to spend that $1,800 in his budget again.
I can still hear you, Mr. Musatello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I turned my microphone off.
Excellent. So it is coming out of the grant.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions on that one? Okay. Next, we're moving to athletics. Letter A, hire football assistant junior high coach. We'll reserve to talk about that in executive session. Moving on to transportation. It is that time of year that we need to approve the vehicles that Tri-County would use for the upcoming school year. So you can see the entire list. If you're looking at that particular list, on the very last page, you will see that there are 7 new school buses that are listed there. So if you look at the last column on third page where it says Bluebird, those are all the 7 new propane buses for the new school year.
Mr. Johnston, can we go
Yes.
back to athletics for a second, please?
Sure. Yep.
The governor's recommendation today, are we along enough to have any information on that concerning fall sports?
Sure. So I'll explain to you. So currently, we still do have our fall sports going through any type of beginning of the year practices following the athletic health and safety plan that we've developed. As of course today, you heard a recommendation from the governor. I will tell you I've been watching that, what has happened because of his remarks today. I do know that PIAA has contacted the governor asking for a meeting to say, okay, what does that mean? Again, he said it as a recommendation, but I do know that PIAA has scheduled a meeting. So I would say that probably within the next day or two, we should hear more detailed information from that.
PIAA is set to meet tomorrow. We should have a statement from PIAA by tomorrow afternoon.
Well, there you go. There's the latest, Mr. Hardesty. Mrs. Dolges could tell me that the PIAA meeting is set for tomorrow.
Thank you.
Sure. So back to transportation, letter B, approved drivers. So you can see the entire list of possible drivers. That would include all the drivers that drive daily, along with anyone that they could use as a substitute. Just want to remind, when you look at that list, all the clearances come through. If there's anything that's in question, I always run clearances past Mr. Saffron, and him and I determine should they be added to the list or not. Next, under letter C, bus routes, we will have that listed on there. It is at the beginning of the week, Tri-County will be bringing over the routes to the district office. So we will have a motion next Thursday to have you approve routes, and anyone who wants to come and view the routes certainly are welcome to come into the district office for those.
I have a
Any
question.
questions under? Yes.
Yes, sir. I've been asked, and I know one of our policies is saying going from 3 people per seat to 2 people per seat, 2 students.
That's
Are
correct.
our number of buses increasing? Or will we have the same amount? I know in high school we're encouraging driving, but grade school and whatnot, are we increasing the number of buses, and how does that affect if we are, how does that affect reimbursement? And
It could have an effect a little, just a smidge, we'll call it that way. So I have had discussion with Tri-County. They have developed all the routes so that there is absolutely no bus that will be carrying, or I should say, that is assigned more than 44 students. So again, keep in mind when Mrs. Dole just said about no parking passes paying for that type of thing. We do, if students are willing to drive and to cut down on the numbers, we want them to do that. But however, back to your question, that we still have to assign students to those buses. So I have to say to you, there will be no more than 44 students assigned to any one bus. It is not increasing the number of school buses that we need. They have rerouted those other buses that did not have that many students on it. So we have, I asked how many buses would have 44 assigned to it, and the answer was 3 of our 14.
Am I correct in stating, no matter COVID or not, the reason, because, you know, we've all been asked, you've been asked, why do I see so few students on a bus? And I've said we're required to have enough space on a bus on a route to take care of every student if they decided to ride that bus. Is that a correct statement?
You are exactly right, exactly what you said. So if any parent or student is out there, even though we're encouraging any student that wants to drive and their parents permit them to drive to school to help reduce the numbers that's on the bus, regardless, your son or daughter has a spot on a bus or van. That is a requirement. We have to make sure that even if a student isn't riding it, that they have a assigned spot on that bus. Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnston, will they have assigned seats in the bus?
Yeah, so our procedure will be this, that as students are loading the bus in the morning, it's going to load from back to front. Again, that's just to cut down the number of people that the students have to go by. The same thing will happen. So let me explain it this way. So in the morning, we wanted to cut down on the number of times that a student would have to pass between other students. So we're going to load from the back to the front in the morning. When we dismiss them off the bus to take temperatures, they're going to go, of course, from the front to the back. On that route, though, we are going to ask students to remember where they're seated because at dismissal, then, we're going to ask them to go back to those same seats. So there's only 1 of 4 times that students will pass beside other students that's already seated on the bus. So if they remember where that is, if they sit back in their assigned seats in the morning, there's only 1 time that they're all going back on that bus that they may have to go by someone. But as we unload, students will then get off from front to back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnston.
Other questions on transportation? Okay. Next, policies. If you take a look, we have a number of policy revisions. Let me just take, if you have a handout, letter A is just simply an explanation of all the policy changes that you have in front of you. Again, I'm not going to go through every single one of those policies that has revisions to it, but I will tell you and remind you that the bold print are the changes. So with that said, let me now go back to the very first handout that you have where it gives the explanation. So policy 204, Mrs. Zeglin and Mrs. Dolges has talked to you already about. So the attendance policy is doing a couple things. One, it's reminding everyone that the law has changed that about compulsory school age. So you can see that for the 2021 school year, compulsory school age, we defined from the time the person and parental relationship places the student in school, which shall be no later than 6 years of age. It used to be 7, and now also reach to the age of 18, and it used to be 17, unless the student has graduated from school. Again, probably the most effort will be on the end. Sometimes we have a few students that want to leave the school, but now they are going to be required to be here until the age of 18 instead of 17. A couple other things that, and again, Mrs. Zeglin and Mrs. Dolges has already pointed out that attendance is giving flexibility to administration because of the situation we're in to if you actually go to the policy, it's number 13 is one of the reasons to be excused. And again, that gives the administration to work with the family if there's some situation that a student needs to be out because of comfort level or going through a situation related to COVID, that we will certainly be working with families and students this school year. Next, I also want to point out that then the rest of all of the other policies that's listed there in front of you, as we was going through dealing with COVID back in May, end of May, and you can see this in the explanation, U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, published federal regulation implementing Title IX and making the emphasis on sexual harassment, and that Title IX and policies establish that we would recognize procedures. Mr. Muscatello and I will be serving as the point people, so that any time that any type of harassment is related or a situation occurs, it can be reported to the principals. Principals then would relay it to us. And I will tell you that it's a big, high emphasis. So Mr. Muscatello and I will be going to trainings shortly to make sure that we're trained on when those types of complaints come to us, how we will handle them. Also, because not only on policy 103 and 104, which basically is related to sexual harassment, one of which policy 103 has to do with the students, and the only difference is then 4 has to do with 104 has to do with staff. So those run parallel together. With all the rest of the policies, as you take a look at those, again, it's all the points highlighted in each one of them that has to do with Title IX sexual harassment and how complaints can be filed, and how those tie through the other policies that are listed on the agenda this evening. Any questions on those? Again, remind you that then we've provided every single one of those policies, and the highlighted print is the revisions to each one of those. Questions? Okay, if not, number 11, we have no correspondence. 2, under new business, approved guest teacher list. And I will tell you that you have it in front of you. And again, this just adds even more to our concern as we go into the school year. So if you take a look at handout A and handout B, those are our substitutes right now that we have to work with so far for this school year. So I will tell you it's very short. So we will have to be creative, and as people are absent. So again, those 2 lists will need to be approved. And we do have short lists, as you can see, under letter A and B. Questions, comments on those?
Mr. Johnson.
Yep.
One question I have, I know in years past, we've talked about the lack of substitutes, things like that. And there's been times that, all collectively classes in a study hall type setting and things like that. Is this an opportunity now, whenever that does occur, rather than having sort of I wouldn't call it do nothing, but there's really no instruction. Is this an opportunity to have the
Absolutely.
the Chromebooks availability and to get on and do some of this work?
All the administrators sitting there looking at you have the emphasis, and they know as we go through this school year is the nice approach with the Chromebooks, is that we have to understand, or parents and students need to understand, if you're coming to the brick and mortar school, you're going to have the Chromebook in your hand. And teachers are going to create Google Classrooms for you. So in situations where, just as you pointed out, material and everything will be loaded right there that will be able to be accessed and used. So no longer will be a situation of we can just say, oh, you're going to go in this particular room and it's a study hall for the day. No, we're going to say, teachers, listen, this is going to happen. Here's our sub list. Here's our issues. We need you to have that work in there for even our brick and mortar students so that they can access and work on it.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage that because when you talk remote learning, that's remote learning. And, do you have to have somebody there in front of a classroom for instruction?
Sure.
Not necessarily nowadays. So,
right.
Yeah, I'd take full advantage of that.
Yep. Good point. Other questions on that one? Okay, looking at 12C, we have a list of teachers that is asked to be approved for detention monitors after school. Letter D, those teachers have submitted letters to be approved for after-school tutoring. Letter E is a list of teachers that have volunteered to be approved for high school monitoring in the mornings. And then letter F are teachers that have asked to be approved to be Penns Manor Cyber teachers, and those appear under letter F. And so we'll ask for motions on every single one of those areas to be approved for next week. Questions? Okay. Next, letter B under new business, letter G, sorry. You also have a handout, or it's in your portal. It's an agreement similar to the one you approved last month. It was with the Guidance Center. We actually have 2 liaisons that come and work with the SAP team at the high school. And this particular agreement is now with Armstrong, Indiana County Drug and Alcohol. They send a SAP liaison to the SAP meetings, and they are actually the, so we have student in need. It's that individual that connects with those students. Questions on that one? Okay, moving along. Next, letter H, approved contract for IEP medical review service with Dr. Parks. You have that again in front of you, 12H, and we have been using Dr. Parks. Anything that has to do with access in an IEP is reviewed by him, and he has to approve their eligibility. And you can see that it's $8 for each medical authorization that he gives on any documents that he reviews for a student. Questions on that one? Okay, next, letter I, hire long-term elementary teacher. We'll talk about that in executive session. Letter J, hire a 4-hour cleaner. We'll talk about that in executive session. And then we're hiring a second 4-hour cleaner, and we'll discuss that in executive session. Next, letter I, under new business, we would ask that you approve the Penns Manor Area School District Chromebook program to include actually the availability for an insurance program. And we'll ask Mr. Gramling to give you an explanation on that. And you either have it as a hard handout or in your portal.
So to plan for potential damage to the Chromebooks, of course, the agreement is set to set forth the expectations of how to care for those Chromebooks, but also what would happen if one of those is damaged. And we plan to offer 3 options for that. So option 1 is for the parent to just pay if there is any damages to the Chromebooks. The nice thing about Chromebooks is they're not that expensive. We're purchasing Chromebooks at the time being $219, $259 for touchscreen monitors. But that market has not stabilized, and availability and pricing is not very good right now. So to get those Chromebooks on the market now, we might not pay that. So even though we're saying that's our expected price, eventually we'll see it go back down to that. But with every school in the country trying to purchase Chromebooks right now, the availability and the price are not what we paid for 3 months ago. And because of that, and because of the amount of Chromebooks that have now been thrust out there, the part market pricing has also not stabilized. And we're looking at anywhere from, whereas before we could get screens in around $20, $25, they're now $38 to $60. So the option of purchasing no insurance and just paying for damages, that could become a costly option if a student broke any parts. But we'll do our best to make sure that that burden to the student and the parent is not high. We'll try to do through our sources and use shop around to make sure we get the best price. But there is a price and we hope to see those come down. The second option, we would like to introduce insurance program. And we looked at different schools, what they were doing, and looked at there is companies that already provide this insurance, but the one negative thought we saw that is if our parents purchase that insurance, that money's out the door and it's to that company. Whereas if we offer the insurance program ourselves, as a collective, we can share that cost and keep that cost down. So kind of the median price on that was $30. And that's what we have settled on is one student, one Chromebook, a $30 insurance program to hold down our liability to that program. We're offering 2 claims on that. So 2 repairable or replaceable incidences, whereas we would fix it and return it to the student, and that would be included in their premium. If the Chromebook was deemed a total loss, and this is accidental damage, we would replace that for a $75 deductible. So you would have the $30 premium and then a $75 deductible to replace the Chromebook. And we would replace that Chromebook one time in that. The third option, we know that there are some households in our district where multiple Chromebooks will be going into that household. And to offer a family-friendly option, we're offering a family plan. That family plan is $60. And it is basically 2 individual plans together, though that will cover unlimited amount of Chromebooks and unlimited amount of students in that household. So if you have 5 students, 5 Chromebooks in that household, it will cover those Chromebooks. But it will only give you 4 claims and 2 replacements at $75 deductible. So it is just 2 individual plans, but it covers as many Chromebooks as in that household.
Questions for Mr. Gramling? I do also want to add, just so you know, we did present this to Mr. Safran, so he's read it from one page to the next. So when it comes to the language of the agreement and everything that's printed in here, he's gone through it and has approved it also.
Mr. Johnson, how with our books, let's say, if somebody loses a book or a book's damaged, they pay for it upright. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if a student damages a textbook, yes, they have to pay the replacement cost of that textbook.
If in textbooks and Chromebooks, okay, they don't have the insurance, how do we, and they decline to pay for that, and I imagine that's happened, what do we do in that case?
Sure. So we keep track of all debt list. What we do is that's held. We keep reminding them that it needs to be paid, but we do not issue a high school diploma until all debts are taken care of.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Okay. Next, letter M, rescind a motion that we approved last month to hiring an agricultural resource person. We can talk more about that in executive session. Letter N, appoint school dentist. You can see in front of you, Dr. Sparks, as you recall, has done our dentist exams for numbers of years, and he has retired, taking over his business in Clymer. is a former graduate of Penns Manor, Adam Tomiko, and he has agreed to do the exact same thing as Dr. Sparks has, and that is charging $1 per student for dental exams. Questions on that one? It's true.
Sparks hasn't billed us in 2 years.
So just so you know, Dr. Sparks, even though he would put $1, he hadn't billed us the past 2 years. So just a point for you to know.
Maybe that's why he had to retire.
Maybe. Next, letter O, approve fall volunteers. You can see a list there that's from majorettes. I will tell you, Andrew Packer will be off that list because we had approved him the month before this. And I know we had some question related to the concern of volunteers and the number that is being approved. So I did talk. I ask every single one that has approved or has submitted volunteers. I did hear back from both varsity football, junior high football, and also girls basketball. Their comments was, and again, if I get comments or feedback from majorettes band, I will certainly pass that along to you. Their comments were that they do understand the number of people that they're approving. And a couple of the groups, they emphasize the need more than any as they try to distribute students out in groups, the need to have adult supervision. And I know that we've talked about or have had some discussions email wise on the number of individuals approved. So I do want you to know that the coaching of those areas said a couple things. Again, they needed those individuals simply because of the situation that they're in. They also had pointed out that they like to encourage the volunteers, hoping that they would learn the structures that are there so that when paid coaches leave, we would have trained individuals that can move into those spots. Mr. Melosier even said in his comments that he just certainly wouldn't want to discourage anyone because of the number of or lack of applicants that we get when we open up positions. So further discussion, comments from anyone?
I have just one comment on that. And I think that the point mentioned about having adult supervision for some of those is probably a bigger point when it comes to the need to have volunteers. I think volunteers are good to have. I'm not so certain if volunteers that are 1 year removed from school are good to have at times. Those are the concerns. It doesn't really tie back into having an adult watch somebody they just played as a teammate the year prior. Also, the count of those individuals are probably how many are needed based on the participation of the group team activity you're dealing with. If we're talking about a squad of, just take for an example, a football team having 60, 70, 80 members on a team, obviously that volunteer need would be greater than a team fielding 20 kids at best. I think that's a dynamic we need to look at because, again, it's a minimal cost to the district. I know there is some cost that we have that we pay for some certain things.
Yep.
And I know in some previous emails, it was noted that it starts to develop a pool. And that would be great if we would see that pool step up to that next level. But how many times did we have to advertise for a junior high football coach?
True.
If we have a large pool, we should have had 6 or 7 applicants at the snap of a finger, and we hadn't. And I know other commitments and things like that are priority. That's why folks volunteer. But I think if we have that need of that volunteer that's going to be there to really be useful, or is it just, I like to be close to the action and I'm a body, and I'm there, I'm not so certain if that's good to have, because even looking at an example of say on the majorette side that I see, 1 year, volunteer approval, next year, 2 volunteer approval, this year, 3 volunteer approval.
Sure.
I mean, there's going to be a point in time we're going to surpass that group, more chiefs than Indians, to put it in that case, or that context, per se. So that's the only thought that I had with it. And I don't know if everybody else has anything to offer in that regard or not.
Okay.
I would think most coaches don't want to, because they have to manage them too. And I can speak for what we do.
Mr. Packer, your mic's not on.
I can speak for what was happening on the football side, Rich, and just tell you that the young ones, they do a lot of the grunt work as part of the learning piece. As some guys get a little bit older, they're the ones that's toting the bags around and doing some of that type of stuff. But I do think that they learn. I don't think it's an issue of friendship and whatever. But I do think you have to have a reasonable number, and I think that's what you're talking about. And I wouldn't disagree with that. I am strongly supportive of volunteers, though, because I've watched us struggle to get good coaches at times. And we've opened a lot of positions. And I mean, not too long ago, we hired somebody, I think just because maybe that was the only person that applied. I'm not sure. And then we as a board, we take them only because it's the only person applied. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. But quite frankly, we have to develop younger people, and we need to encourage them to be involved with the kids. It's tough. I think it's a tough job for them. And I wouldn't discourage them, but I sure understand you can't have a million of them. I mean, you have to have some type of proportionate relationship, but strongly support what we have.
Yeah, and I mean, that's probably more the point that I was trying to get at, because, as we continue on, and I'm not saying that there has to be a specific limit for this specific activity, sport, whatever. It just has to be based on the need. And it seems like every time we sit down, we're approving a long list of volunteers, which are good. But in the same token, the quality of those individuals, are they going to contribute to the effort? Is maybe another, or okay, if it's a grunt work kind of thing,
that's not always the case, but they contribute. They don't stand around doing nothing. They shouldn't. And that's important.
I guess that's what we need to emphasize with everybody who starts to ask for these type of things, of that apparent need of what does that look like and what does that mean?
I don't know if anybody knows what it takes to be a volunteer. It's a pain in the butt. And I know I'm saying this publicly. It is a pain in the butt to become a volunteer with the requirements that you have to fulfill. It's not the clearances. It's the testing that you have to take, it depends on the sport. I mean, you have to pass concussion testing, heat acclimation type of stuff. There are dollars that you will incur as a volunteer that you will never get reimbursed. Mileage, whatever it happens to be. And a lot of times I think these things go without notice. So it's not easy to be a volunteer. So I would say that I am truly supportive of them. As a board, we need to look at, you do need to look at, do you have too many? That's the key. But I would say my guess is, if I'm a head coach, I wouldn't want too many, because they manage them too.
And I can. I mean, as we gather those, I can call each coach and advisor and truly say, and have those conversations to say, well, how many students do you have involved this season? And if you tell me that there's 6 and you've submitted 3 people to be volunteers, well, what's the reason for that? Because I agree with you, that isn't adding up.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too, because we would hope that those folks that we hire as head coaches or leaders or advisors in these certain capacities have that sense of, okay, I have that need. I have this need, therefore I'm offering, not the fact of, well, okay, sure, come on, come aboard, because I'm not sure if all the activities like you mentioned, Bob, have to go through all the different clearances and things.
That's
So
possible.
it's maybe easy to do, and then you have a large group of people you're dealing with, and again, it's a management thing from a head coach perspective or advisor's perspective.
Yeah. I want to make one other comment, because I truly see the value and I don't know if I should share his name. I am going to share his name, because I think most of you know him, was Andrew Smogy. A lot of us might be concerned about taking a kid that just graduated from high school. Andrew Smogy he's a very mature kid for someone that probably just graduated a few years ago. But Andrew's been with us for about 4 years now, and he's going to Florida to become, I think, either University of Florida, Florida Gator, to become a PT. He has learned the 4 years that he has been with us, and he was mature enough, probably as a 20-year-old, to step in and do whatever. But that young man is going to help somebody. It may not be Penn's Manor someday. He's, like I said, he's going to become a PT, going to University of Florida, but he is going to help somebody sometime, because he's going to be a great coach. And it's the 4 years that he had here. It'd be nice if he was returned here and was able to do that. But those are the type of things that I think you can give back to young people that graduate. Not everybody can do that either. Not everybody's like that. So, there's a case where he had somebody that turned out rather well. So, but I do think that you're right. You have to be careful how many, because like you said, you could have a tougher time managing volunteers than you do the participants.
Yeah, and that's a good point. If Andrew's into that situation, then it was identified by the head coach or leader of that group to say, yeah, we're able to accept this individual as a volunteer. Identify that, not just, sure, come aboard unknowingly. So, I mean, that's the perspective we have to have in our head coaches and advisors, to pick those people and say, yeah, there's no problem. So.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, moving to letter P, just a couple revisions to the cleaner job description. And if you're on line, you can see the coloring. So let me explain if you have a hard copy. So if you move down under general responsibilities, number 4, we've added the words using current best practice methods, just simply because we're going to have, Mr. Dalton's going to have people come in and train on the new cleaning that we need to, and the disinfecting that's going to take place. So he has individuals coming in. So we want to make sure what they're being taught to do is that they continue with those methods. Next, over on the second page, we have found that our cleaners and our custodial maintenance job descriptions are very close in identity. So we have talked, Mr. Dalton and I, and there's just 2 things that we want to remove to distinguish what a custodian is going to do compared to a cleaner. And so we would be taking out number 4 under specific responsibilities, taking out waxes. They'll still continue to clean floors, but they would not be waxing. And then number 12, just removing painting, and then everything else stays in place. So we would like to make those additions, subtractions from that particular job description. Any questions, comments? Okay, So that there's one additional item that I would like to add for a motion next week, and I have to apologize. It is me, and that is that the need to have a motion because I forgot this. Typically, I do this 2 months earlier than this. We have our ALICE program that we use online for our training. And so I've been asking for approval in June every year. And again, I forgot it. So we need to add it to have it approved next week so we don't lapse in it. And it's our online training for all of our ALICE. So every employee is loaded into the system. It monitors the coursework that they do. You can see that the total amount for this coming year is $2,050. We pay for that typically out of the drug-free money that we get in a grant, and we'll actually incorporate this into a grant that we'll be submitting here shortly that's due on August 19th, where we'll be getting, if they approve everything, $25,000, but $2,050 of it would be paying our ALICE online training. And as you know, that's what we have taught our students and our faculty for evacuations and the procedures that we use. And again, that's an online service for $2,050. Any questions on that one? Okay, if not, we will move to the executive session. For those that you are watching for the first time, that concludes our committee meeting. Next week, the board will meet here in this room again for motions related to all the topics that we talked about this evening. I do, just before we leave, want to say thank you to every board member that's here. The past couple months, as administration and teachers have worked together, we appreciate, as administration and teachers, your support and the ideas that we've brought to you for moving forward to reopen schools and giving teachers or giving parents and students options, because you've given us the space to develop things. And then when we present them, we certainly appreciate your support. So it takes all stakeholders in this to make it happen. So as a superintendent, I know not all superintendents have this type of atmosphere. So I have to take time to say thank you to each one of you for your support. So appreciate it. And we will move to executive session.
My fellow board members, I need to apologize to you for my lackadaisical